Good morning, everybody. If you remembered from one of the previous videos, I mentioned that the transmission doesn't have any oil in it. And we don't really know why that is yet. We can't drive it very far without oil in the transmission, obviously. So I need to address that, try to figure out what's going on, where it's leaking from, and see if I can fix it or not. My second goal for this video is to correctly identify the models of the transfer case and the transmission. That way we know exactly what we have if we have to order parts. Underneath here, this is the transfer case and it's connected to the transmission. The transfer case basically transfers power up to the front differential for the four-wheel drive. And if you remember from one of the previous videos, I mentioned that the transmission is very low on oil. It looks to me like there's a significant leak along the bottom of this transfer case pan on the inside. And at least that's what I'm hoping at this point. And the transmission and the transfer case share the same oil. So if this is where it's leaking from, that would explain why the transmission is so low on oil. The plan of attack here is to remove the pan from the transfer case, clean up the mating surface, put a new gasket and sealant on it. Then I'll put it back together, let it sit for a day. Then we'll fill it up with oil and see if that doesn't fix the leak. This right here is just a block-off plate. Some of these old trucks were equipped with a rear power takeoff shaft, or PTO, and the PTO shaft would have been connected here. It would be cool to put another PTO shaft on this truck. It goes all the way back to the back bumper. That's where you connect your attachments. So anyway, let's get back to the task at hand. We'll remove the pan from the transfer case and replace that gasket. Because it's been leaking and because the transmission is low on oil, I don't expect a whole lot of oil to come out of this side, but there still could be some on this side. I don't know, we'll just have to wait and see here, but I've got a pan underneath there just in case. And we got to find where the lip is here. And we got some oil. Yeah, there wasn't much oil in there, just as I suspected. All right, now we can clean this up and get the new gasket installed. All right, I've got the mating surfaces cleaned up on both the pan and the bottom of the housing. And I've got some Permatex number 2 on this surface as well as on the pan, and then we'll sandwich the gasket in between. All right, I've got this pan completely installed. I'm happy with that. And I can't tell if it's leaking up here or not. I don't think it is, but it's hard to tell because everything is so oily in here. So as long as we're down here, I'm going to replace this gasket as well. And if we do end up putting a PTO shaft on here in the future, we'll at least know what it looks like inside there. Fairly clean. Well, let me see if we can look up in there before I put it back on. Get a good view. That's all there is to it. All right, mission accomplished. Both gaskets are replaced. All the bolts are cinched down. We're going to let that Permatex number 2 sit for a minimum of 24 hours. And then we'll come back and fill up the transmission and transfer case with some gear oil to factory spec. We'll keep our fingers crossed that this repair solved the leak. If not, then we're going to be kind of stuck here for a while, but we're going to have to wait a couple days to find out. All right, so although the transfer case and the transmission share the same oil, they do each have their own independent fill plugs and check plugs. According to the manual, the capacity for both is about 7 pints, which equates to about 3.5 US quarts. So I'm going to attempt to put half in the transfer case, and then we'll put the other half in the transmission. And that way we know both chambers start out with oil, and after that it can slosh around back and forth. And I'm going to try out this little plastic pump I found on Amazon for a few bucks. See if this works. There we go. Well, let me tell you, that is a miserable job. It's hard to deal with, and the hose kept trying to pop off. And anyway, we got roughly 1.75 quarts in the transfer case. So let's go look at the transmission side and just I just want to get this job finished because this is pretty miserable. All right, this is the transmission fill plug. All right, we got that job done. Nice to have that behind us. So again, I just added the oil in those fill plugs, check plugs, and I tried to get the capacity right according to the manual, but ultimately what I did was I just waited till I saw a little bit of oil coming out the plug, and then I stopped adding oil and put the plugs in. And based on how much I put in the transmission, that was just about completely empty. So that's a bit of a mystery. We're going to keep our fingers crossed and hope this new gasket on this pan resolve the problem. So I'll drive it around the property a little bit just to get things all churned up, and then when I pull it back into the shop, I'll put some white rags underneath it, and we'll come out in the morning and check the rags to see if anything leaked out. Well, I was just about to take the truck for a drive to see if you know, the transmission was going to leak at all, even before I put it into the shop. And I added some more fuel to it, probably added about 6 gallons or so. And wouldn't you know it, the fuel gauge started working. I've added a couple gallons to the tank a couple different times, and it's always read empty. But today I added about 6 gallons, and that actually brought it up to almost a half a tank. So I was pleasantly surprised to see that. We're not going to have to monkey around with that repair. So clearly that was my fault. I just didn't put enough gas into it. But in my defense, you'd think that 2 gallons would actually register on the gauge. But oh well, like I said, I put about 6 gallons in, and we're almost up to a half a tank now. Here, I'll show you. Oil pressure works, amp gauge works, but it appears that the temperature gauge still does not work. So 3 out of 4 ain't bad, I guess, so we'll have to investigate that one in the future. All right, I've got 2 fresh mats underneath the transfer case and transmission. We'll leave them there overnight and come back and check in the morning. All right, it is the next day. Let's get underneath the truck and see if there's any evidence of leaking oil. Uh-oh. I was hoping we were going to find these mats completely dry, but we've got 3 small to medium-sized drip patterns here. So let's look up. So we're looking up from the mat now, and I can see 3 corresponding drips of oil from the cross member here. So let's look above that. And you can see right in there that fresh oil that's coming down. Well, I need to get under there a little bit further, but from this angle, it looks like the oil is leaking out from that bolt or that gasket. All right, let's wipe some of this down and see if we can figure out exactly where it's coming from. All right, well, I've had some time to think about this issue. So at the moment, the leak could be coming from the bolt only, or it could be coming from the bolt and the gasket in between the two flanges there. And I'm pretty sure that that's a through bolt. And what that means is I think that bolt extends into the interior chamber of the transmission where the transmission oil is. So I'm going to remove that bolt, and I'm pretty sure we're going to get the rest of the transmission fluid is going to come right out of that hole. So I have a pan underneath it, get everything nice and dry, and I'm going to put some sealant on the threads on that bolt and put it back in and torque it back down and let it sit for a day. Then we'll add some more fluid and see if it still leaks or not. I think that's the smartest thing to do before we start talking about removing the transfer case and replacing that gasket. If that's what we have to do, then that's what we have to do. But that's a pretty big job, so I like to try the simple fixes first. Well, we were right about the bolt being a through bolt. Well, all right, it's 99% drained out. I shot some brake clean up in there, and we're just gonna fish out the rest of the liquid, dry it all off real good, then put the sealant on the bolt. All right, that's tight. I'm gonna let that sit for 24 hours. We'll come back out here, put oil in it, see what happens. All right, it's the next day now. I've already got the transmission filled up with oil again, and now we're back in the waiting game. I'm gonna go inside for a while and get warm, maybe get a soda. It's about 23 degrees outside right now, and we've got a nice warm fire going on in the house. So we'll give this a few hours. We'll come back and see what it looks like at that point. All right, it's been about 2 hours, and I don't see any evidence of leaking coming from the bolt or from the gasket below the bolt, but there is a leak right there. Something new, something I haven't noticed before. It looks like it's coming from that bolt right in there. So I thought I'd go ahead and get a wrench on this bolt just to see if I could tighten it up any. And the stinking thing is loose. So I started tightening this bolt, and this union here between these two pieces got closer, and it started to squish oil out of that crack right there. All right, I got that bolt all cinched up, and I found another loose bolt. I can't show you because it's up in there, but it also had some oil on the head, and it was also kind of loose. So I tightened that one down also. We still don't have any leakage coming from the bolt that we put the sealant on, so that's good so far, but the only real test will be to wait another 24 hours. All these leaks that we've seen so far have all ended up on this cross member, and that's what drips down onto the ground. So tomorrow we'll get our eyes, of course, up in there and up in there where that loose bolt was, but the real telltale sign will be if there's any oil on that cross member or not, and if there's any oil on the ground, of course. All right, I'm gonna get rid of these old mats. I'll pull the truck back in right now, let it sit overnight, come out and check this in the morning again. Hopefully it won't look like that. All right, guys, another day has gone by. It's a beautiful morning here. It's about 20 degrees at the moment, gonna warm up to about 37 today. And it is time to look under the truck and see if our repair worked or not. I'm almost afraid to look. Well, I only see one drop there. That's a huge improvement. we can actually live with one drop. But since I'm thorough, we're going to investigate that one drop now, see where it's coming from, and see if it warrants fixing it. All right, well, here's our one lone drip. And it looks like it's no longer coming from the bolt, but it seems to be coming from this gasket somewhere. Let's wipe some of this away. So long story short, it's way better than it was. I think we could actually run the vehicle like this with that one drip, but we're already underneath here. I'm gonna try one last Hail Mary here. I think I'll try to jam some sealant right up in there. There seems to be a little bit of a void there for some reason. So for those of you who might be wondering why I'm spending so much time on this, number one, you have to have oil in the transmission. Number two, if we can't get this leak fixed the easy way, like on the exterior of the housing, then we have to take the entire transfer case off the transmission, off the vehicle, put it on the bench, clean it up, and replace it with a brand new gasket. And I am really trying to avoid that. By the way, this is not sealant, this is plastic weld. I think you guys know me well enough by now. This is not my normal style to try things like this. But I got that terrible leak that we had down to one small drip. So in lieu of having to remove the entire transfer case to replace that gasket, I just want to try this one last thing before we make the commitment to do all that. Well, it's many hours later in the day now, and I would like to report that that leak has completely been fixed. But as you can see under the truck here, we still have one tiny little drip. So the bad news is we still have a leak, but the good news is we have a very small leak, and that is something that I can monitor and keep my eye on as we move forward with the project. That's not going to hang us up right now. We will have to split the two eventually and put a new gasket in there. But for now, it's totally fine. We can move forward with it and we can drive the truck. All right, so the last thing I'm going to do for this video is I need to identify exactly what transfer case and transmission we have so I can order the right gaskets for it. Well, that little tag there says 5-25. That there says Spicer, I think. And there's also some identifying markings right back there on this. So I did a quick Google search, found out that does say Spicer. That stands for Dana Spicer. I believe this model is going to either be a Dana 18 or a Dana 20. I guess one of the ways to identify what you have is you measure the diameter of this protrusion, and inside there's a shaft there that fits in there. So we're essentially measuring the diameter of the shaft, and we have 1 inch and 1/8. So at first I thought the model of the transfer case was a Dana 20, but because I'm not an expert on these Willys Jeeps yet, I wanted to do some more research just to be certain, and I think I was actually wrong. I think this is a Dana 18 transfer case, and I'll show you why. So if you look up front here, just to demonstrate something, you see how the differential for the front wheel drive is offset to the passenger side? Well, they say a Dana 18 transfer case also has an offset rear differential, where a Dana 20 would be in the middle, like a regular vehicle. So let's look underneath and end the suspense and see what we got. Well, if we're looking from this angle only, it might not be obvious, but if we change the angle of the camera a little bit, you can see that the rear differential is indeed offset to the right. If I measure from that point to that point, it's roughly 9 inches. It's a crude measurement because the tape isn't all the way in there and it's kind of crooked, but that's good enough for what we're trying to figure out here. right about the same spot. We're looking at about 14 inches, which means this differential is 5 inches offset to the right. I'm sure you Willys experts out there knew that already, but this is my first time wrenching on a Willys truck, so that's news to me. Anyway, I think we can definitively say now we have a T90 transmission and a Dana 18 transfer case. So even though this wasn't a complete victory today, I do feel like we made a little bit of progress. Before we can get this truck back on the road, I still need to investigate the brakes, both differentials, the drive shafts. In the meantime, I'll sign off for now, and we'll catch you on the next video. Thanks everybody for watching. As always, I appreciate it. We'll see you later.